Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett, who's not actually here today. Yeah, he will be joining us. We're going to get him off in a corner, and he's going to be hitting me up on Skype, and we'll click the little record here, and we'll hear a few words from the King of the Mountain, but he is on some international business. But we've still got a heck of a show for you today. Someone suggested, this might be the end of Vince McMahon in WWE. The report came out over the last week that he put all of his remaining TKO shares up for sale. So seemingly in the not too distant future, there could be no official ties any longer in any capacity to Vince McMahon in WWE. It certainly feels like the end of an era, especially when you think that he just missed his very first WrestleMania. So if the sun is truly setting on Vince McMahon's time in professional wrestling, I'm not totally sure of that, by the way. But if that's true, I wanted to make sure that we got the record straight as much as we could with all of his interactions with Jeff Jarrett. Boy, you talk about the ups and downs, walking out on Vince at the In Your House in Nashville in 95, and then coming back, and then cutting that promo on the top star, the cash cow, and walking out again. And then getting fired on national TV and then coming back. Boy, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what we're going to be talking about today. All of Jeff's experiences with Vince McMahon seem to be done for now. But, as with everything else in wrestling, stay tuned. Card subject to change. But now, joining us live via satellite, can't believe that's a real thing, Double J, south of the border, your friend and mine, Jeff Jarrett. What are you doing in Mexico?
Oh, Connie, it's our usual recording day, and I surely miss you. I don't get to talk smack about football or basketball or Alabama, and we were going to talk maybe a little Kentucky basketball, and just have our usual talking smack. I don't even think I can throw shade on Chris Clark, but no. All kidding aside, Conrad, it is a big day, and I'll refer to myself today as the King of the Mountain, because that's how they like to refer to me down here at south of the border. But no, I am in Monterrey, Mexico today for my return. It's been over 2 years, and almost 2 years to the day, ironically. But no, I've returned to Monterrey, Mexico, here to make an announcement, start promoting multiple media stops here in Monterrey. But yes, April the 27th at the baseball stadium, Triple Mania kicks off. They're looking for a huge, spectacular event. And I didn't come alone, Conrad. None other than the 7'4", 442-pound, 1 billion Stockton City came with me. And boy, you talk about some heads turned from the time that we walked through immigration and stepped into our car to dinner last night. And then, of course, all the media rounds today. It's going to be all over social media. But, Conrad, we're here to promote. And the match that I've announced today is pretty darn cool. It's going to be, we'll call it Team World, just here at Team World. It's going to be Sam Adonis, we'll call him a mainstay here in AAA, as well as QT Marshall. Everyone knows him from AEW. Also, Parker Boudreaux. And he, what a physical, genetic dude this guy is. And then, of course, Stockman, to top it all, 7'4". And we're announcing an 8-man tag, and this may be right up your alley because, Conrad, the fourth partner, I'll kind of lead you into that. But the first guy is going to be Octagon Jr. His father is truly a iconic legend here, Moreno Kid, a true Lucha Libre star. He can do all the high flying. And then, of course, Psycho Clown, a guy that I've had battles with going back over, at least 10 years, maybe 12, 14 years. I've got a scar on my head from a guitar shot. He's got a few scars on his body from myself. So a big 8-man tag, and they have a mystery partner, Conrad. So looking forward to returning, doing the media rounds down here, and just kind of doing what the Outlaws does, talking smack and promoting professional wrestling.
Man, I love to hear it. That's the reason we called an audible, boys and girls. Jeff Jarrett not using that Hendersonville Wi-Fi, using a little Verizon south of the border. The King of the Mountain is back at Triple Mania, and it's going down next weekend. And don't sleep on this tag team. QT Marshall is a criminally underrated heel. I know what you're thinking. I hate that guy. That's kind of the idea, folks. And let me also say, I'm a huge Sam Adonis fan. You and I haven't spent much time talking about Sam, but Sam is the real life brother of Corey Graves, for those of you who don't know that, but a longtime professional wrestler, super, super talented, long overdue to be a big American star, and Mexico, AAA specifically, super lucky to have him. And what a great group he rounded up there, man. And Parker Boudreaux, I think if Jim Ross were on this call right now, he'd say that dude's a blue chipper. I mean, you took a look at him in college and you just knew, hey, is this a descendant of Brock Lesnar? It's a big old boy, and it's going to be some big action. And it's happening south of the border, Mexico, Monterrey, in a stadium next weekend. So don't forget, this weekend is AEW Dynasty from St. Louis. Tickets are on sale now. It is an unbelievable card. They always deliver on pay-per-view. And so does Jeff Jarrett. He's going to be there next weekend, April 27th, a huge tag team match. Team Jarrett World. How about that? Parker Boudreaux, QT Marshall, Sam Adonis, Double J, Jeff Jarrett, and 1 in a billion, Satnam Singh. Mexico ain't ready for Satnam Singh, are they, Jeff?
Buddy, they're not ready for his eating. They're not ready for his movement around. And it is, Conrad, we've done all kinds of media. We've done sports stations. We've done general entertainment. We've done the government news. We've been everywhere. And, you know, when people literally get up next to Satnam, they are truly amazed. So I think sometimes I may take it for granted, but he's definitely a head turner. And as one of the promoters that is from here in Monterey, he said in, I call it broken English, but he said, this guy's truly a game changer. And I said, he certainly is. And so I can just tell you the buzz and the excitement off the announcement and social media channels down here, they tell me I'll blow it up. So guys, super excited. Be happy to get back in the saddle next week. But yeah, we have to call it audible. But buddy, it's what we do, and it is definitely part of my world. So I appreciate you slotting me in, pal, in your busy schedule.
Hey, man, I'm just glad you could make the time to make it work. Tell Dorian and all of our friends below the border I said hello, and man, I can't wait to get back down there. I had a blast at Triple Mania, and I know you guys will enjoy the show. One more time, set your calendars. This Sunday is AEW Dynasty. It is going to be an unbelievable performance. If you haven't seen the card, it is stacked from top to bottom. A lot of people have already said Ospreay and Danielson's match of the year, and they haven't even got to the building yet. And that is just one of many other dream matches like Okada and Pac, Joe and Strickland, and so much more. And how about Bucks and FTR one last time, this time with some maybe personal grudges? It's going to be an awesome show. You don't want to miss it, live on pay-per-view. That is this Sunday. But next Saturday, it's all about Triple Mania, the Last Outlaw, the King of the Mountain. He's going south of the border, and he's bringing some friends with him. Somebody's getting a guitar necklace, and it's happening on pay-per-view next weekend. We'll have all the details next week on My World, where Jeff and I will be recording brand new content. But at least for now, we're going to hear Jeff's many, many takes on the one and the only, now infamous, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. We'll see you next week right here on My World. I know you wrestled Booker T in front of a sold-out crowd in Minnesota, October 6th. Back in the confines of Atlanta, Eric Bischoff does a Prodigy chat on the 7th that says, nope, no offer for him. And then on the 8th, 48 hours after you wrestled Booker T in Minneapolis, you're in New York City getting picked up, and I assume a car service takes you out to Vince's house.
That was all the same week.
I think so.
Okay. That lines up right. So yes. And I was going to find out if the grass was going to be greener. And Vinnie Mac sold it like it's a beautiful pasture with a back 40. And
well, talk to me about how that works. Did he do the whole, we're going to fly you up first class, pick you up in a limo, drive you out to the house routine?
No, I mean, more or less, we're going to fly you up. Of course, I mean, there wasn't any roll out the red. Well, I mean, it depends on what you define as that. Hey, I looked at it as this. Me and my father are going to go up and talk to Vince. It's a business meeting. Like, no more, no less.
Let me ask you this. Had you been to Vince's house before?
Yes. In the driveway. I'm just trying to think, but no, I didn't hang out at the, I know. Listen,
I know that sounds crazy, but just humor me. There's lots of guys who have a story about, and then I got invited to the house. And there's supposedly like different levels, and guys have just, conspiracy theorists in wrestling. Surprise. But the idea being, hey man, if they meet you at the office, they think you're here. But if you get the house meeting, they think you're here. The idea being, it must have been a little different because I got the house invite. So and so did. Jericho even wrote in his book, I wore shirts that were 2 sizes too small. I put lifts in my boots. I made sure I did push-ups before he answered the door. Everybody is like, they understand my whole career, my aspirations for what I want to be in wrestling are made by the guy on the other side of this door. And this is his house. This is a big opportunity. So everybody has a sort of Vince McMahon house story. And I realize and recognize as a guy who grew up in the business, you're probably like, well, that's the bunch of goofiest Marcus shit I've ever heard. But that is the way it's discussed. So I just want to know from your experience.
I have never heard that.
Oh God, it's in every wrestler's book, Jeff. It's in all their shoot interviews. Like they all have stories about the house and the chef, and there were cookies, and me and Vince locked eyes on the last one, and everybody's got a Vince McMahon house story. So when I brought it up and you looked at me like I had flaming turds hanging out of my mouth, I'm like, this is a thing, Jeff. We got to talk about it.
And look, that's again, I'm going to go back to my set point. Vince was a promoter that came to Memphis, and Lawler talked him into decking him at ringside, and he became, now this promoter of the WWF who had done 4 or 5 WrestleManias at this time, but now he's a manager at ringside and Deck Lawler, and a hell of an angle got him. I've always had it. That's growing up in the business. I just never viewed Vince. Now, respect, I don't want this to come across the wrong way. From the very first time, when you see him in the ring at WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3, it's his show.
Yes.
I've never seen that. My father do it. I'd never seen a promoter. In my mind, Don King was kind of that guy that, shit, he don't box. What the hell is this fruitcake do? That was my only context. When you see Vince command the ring, and obviously he's play-by-play and all that, but understanding that, Vince McMahon does exactly for New York what my father did here. And before that, Nick Gulas and Roy Welch. And over in Texas, it's Fritz Von Erich, and it's Bill Watts down in Louisiana, and it's Jim Sr. over, and Eddie Graham, and going on and on and on. Okay, here's this one cat that took it national with cable TV. That's how I viewed Vince. He put on his shoes every morning like everybody else, but his brain on a whole nother gear. But I never looked at the house and the cookies and that kind of stuff. I never.
Well, no, I wanted to ask, was this, and I think you said before, this is your second visit to the house, but the last time was just in the driveway. This is the first time you got, you made the comparison to Nick Saban. This is the recruiting visit.
Yes.
This is the first one.
Yeah.
So you said he put on a big show, and let's hear about what the presentation, what does he lay out to convince you?
Words in my mouth. So not big show, but over the top, relaxed. Let's talk about it. Hey, how you been? Let's small talk. Jerry this, and Jim Ross was there. And, what I knew now, or what I knew in the next 30, 60, 90, 120 or a year and all that, I didn't realize that this was going right into the head coach. That's, Jim was there, but the conversation was really a Jeff Vince conversation. And that was, I screwed up. I had no idea that how Jim looked at putting his roster together, that it was truly director of player personnel, whatever you want to call, Jim was putting his roster together for the team, for Vince. And I went right in talking to the head coach, but it was a fun 2 or 3 hour conversation. A lot of conversation because.
Hang on. I don't mean to cut you off, but I think I pride myself on being able to what I call speak Jeff.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said there in a roundabout way, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm just trying to clarify. You said Jim was running player personnel and boy, I screwed up. I just started talking to the head coach. It feels as if what you just said right there, translated from Jeff speak, is I maybe didn't show the proper respect to Jim Ross in that circumstance and felt like, why talk to the horse's ass if I could talk to the head? This is the real boss. This is who I focus my attention on. And JR was there. You weren't maybe intentionally being negative, but in your mind, I'm here to put on a Vince show. Oh, and Jim just happens to be here. In hindsight, maybe you wish you spent a little more focus or energy.
Hell, 1,000%. I was under the mindset that whatever Vince wants, Vince is going to get. And that's, but that wasn't, look, the next 12 months told me that in a very uncomfortable way. And the following 12 months of that, even in a more uncomfortable way. That's what
so you felt like, to say it differently, you were accidentally, unintentionally disrespectful to Jim Ross in that meeting.
Disrespectful, probably that's too strong.
Dismissive.
Yes, dismissive. Hey, young guys out there, I'm just going to give you a little, whoever's in the room
matters.
Okay.
If they're important enough to be in that room, they're important enough for you to pay attention to.
There is our golden nugget of the pod. If they're in the room, they're important.
So you leave with the deal, and I assume, based on the way I've heard some of these deals before, but I don't know because you haven't told us about it. Is it as simple as, or let me back up. When you first start the conversation, at any point, do you feel like you should address, and maybe you even game plan or seek your dad's advice? Hey, do we even talk about what happened before? Do I bring it up and say, hey, Vince, first of all, thanks for having me out. I appreciate you letting bygones be bygones and it being water under the bridge from before. Do you even broach that subject? Is it something you feel like as just a nicety to get out of the way?
We discussed it probably before we got on the plane, or when we got on the plane, or in the car. We discussed it beforehand, and it was very simple. Let Vince lead the conversation. He's the boss. It's just that simple. If he brings it up,
talk about it.
Talk about it. Yes.
Did he bring it up?
No.
I didn't imagine that he would. So I also understand that he is going to say things like, I could see, and fill in the blanks there. He might not make any sort of storyline promises. He might not necessarily make any sort of commitment to, you're going to be the champion or whatever, but he will get to this vision for what he sees for you and how he could see you fitting into the system. And then maybe he offers a dollar amount, or does he just kick it back to you and say, what are you looking for? How does that go?
We went outside and talked dollars, just me and him.
By the pool?
Like a back patio.
Okay.
Yeah. But before I get into that, here's kind of the takeaway from the meeting that I think is pretty cool. The new generation era was dead.
Yes.
On the WWE side, I guess we're talking 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I'm just trying to think how the product began to have the attitude in it. Obviously, it wasn't called that at the time, but King of the Ring was in.
You're coming back at the right time. Shawn Michaels is jumping up and crotch chopping.
Yes.
With stuff. Yes.
Stone Cold was in June.
Stone Cold get hot in June of 96. So now we're in 97. Stone Cold's super hot. Yeah. He's just been dropped on his head. He just stunned Vince McMahon at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, but 96 was when Stone Cold, that was kind of a pivotal point, kind of. But all that. So they had all of 96, and now so a full year of that. In that, we'll call it blurring the lines. That's where I'm going with it. The line.
October is when Pillman pulled a gun on Raw. So it's 1 year into the craziness.
Okay. Blurring the lines is kind of what I'm saying is, yes, you can jump the sharp or you can push the envelope too far, but the transition had taken place.
Yes.
So in the room, you have four, and I'm definitely the youngest. Boy, I miss those days. But you have Vince, you have JR, and my father. And all three of those gentlemen had an infinite amount of territory stories. Back in the day, although, in reality, it's not. But, their mindset was they did a lot of stuff where they blurred the lines, Lawler and Dundee, and you can go to any territory in the country, but the blurring of the lines. So there was that kind of camaraderie talk about blurring the lines, which I thought was really cool, that Double J, the country music singer, world's greatest singer, world's greatest entertainer, world's greatest wrestler, all that over the top, new generation character, all that kind of stuff. The conversation that I can't wait to be Jeff Jarrett, that blurring the lines, let's get in there, no cowboy hat, no blinking lights, that kind of promo. Vince is like, I can just see you, you got a lot here, and we'll write some good stuff. Or not, he didn't say right. We'll do some good stuff, but just kind of the authenticity. That's what I remember. You always, what do I remember? What's my takeaway? Yes, yeah. I know we agreed on money. My takeaway was, I cannot wait to be this extension of Jeff Jarrett in the WWF.
Boys and girls, I can't wait to talk about Jeff Jarrett's penis with you. You already know about Stroke. It's a patented move from Jeff Jarrett. You already know about With My Baby Tonight. Well, you got to know that the hot tag that Double J is looking for, it's not one that the Road Dogg can give him. It's only one that Blue Chew can give him. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. As you know, Double J's a thrifty son of a gun. Take them anytime, day or night. You can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Now, the process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And the best part, it's all done online. No visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. Boing. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast and Jeff's Wiener. Coincidentally, if you take a Blue Chew, man, you can swing that rascal like a guitar. Start hitting ladies in the head with it. Well, maybe don't do that. Just because Jeff did doesn't mean you should. So let's talk about a conversation that's reported in the Observer. It's written that you spoke with Vince McMahon on October 15th. So the day before you have your last show under contract. So let's remind everybody that big show in Atlanta at the Georgia Dome is on the 11th. The next day you invite Richard Scrushy down to Birmingham for SmackDown on the 12th. You're off on the 13th and 14th. You have a conversation with Vince on the 15th. And I assume at that point, you've already, in theory, worked out a deal with WCW. Maybe you haven't put pen to paper, but the finer points have been discussed and agreed by both parties.
Correct.
And I believe it's written in the Observer that both you and Vince agree the issue with this contract situation and Jeff Jarrett and the World Wrestling Federation was Jim Ross. Did Vince say that?
I can tell you this, Conrad, next time you're over to the house, I'm going to take you to the spot in this house that I had the conversation. And this is how it's, I was in October of 99, I was remodeling the house upstairs. I lived downstairs, and it's funny. We had the kitchen, a bedroom, and a bathroom. That's what we lived in. Had the one kid, but back in those days, we had the old proverbial answering machine.
Yeah.
And I had one voicemail and two, and I don't want this to be part, but a couple of hangups that I just assumed, but I was gone because, again, not home very long. I don't know if it's dry cleaners and gym and family, whatever. But when I got back in, I got back there. I'm like, okay. And I called, he called me, but I was going to call him. And he's traveling the world. So he was not in Connecticut, to my knowledge. I feel like he wasn't, or he just got back, whatever. But the conversation, hey, pal, where are we at with this thing? And I just sort of gave him the long and short of it. Vince, I can assure you I'm going to be there Sunday. and you have nothing to worry about. But if we're calling to talk about a contract, candidly, it's too late. Okay, I appreciate it. Jeff, will I see you Sunday? I said, absolutely, sir.
So he knew what the circumstance was 2 days ahead of time.
100%.
The next day, you're going to work.
Conversation. Remember, man to man, promoter to talent. Will I see you on Sunday? Absolutely. You have nothing to worry about. I'm going to tear the house down with China.
Was there any, did you feel a sense of urgency? You talked about that earlier. Did you feel a sense of urgency to work out a deal with WCW before you put over China? There's been famous stories before. Like, I think even when Flair lost to Mr. Perfect in a loser leaves town match, he goes back to WCW and Ole says, what value do you have to me now since you just lost on TV? And that was to Mr. Perfect. Now you're about to lose to a lady. Were you concerned, man, this might hurt my negotiating? I need to go ahead and get something on paper now.
Not the wins and losses. I've never really given it that kind of mentality. I mean, that's, I, in my mind, my value was as high as it had been since me and Road Dogg were together. That's how I viewed it. My value is there, but I also knew that if I'm walking in a door, it's like, all right, Jeff, you left there, so that isn't an option. It's supply and demand. Okay, yeah. You want me to? I mean, so I would have been bargaining with the chip with Bill Bush that, hey, I might go to Mexico or Japan. Okay, it was that simple.
Let's talk about the Nutter Center, October 16th, 1999. You talked to Vince the day before. This is your last house show. You're working third from the top. The main event that night is Big Show versus the hardcore champion, the Big Boss Man, in a non-title match. Underneath that is Road Dogg beating Chris Jericho. You're third from the top. You're the IC champ. You beat the Godfather. Does anybody in the backstage area, are you telling any of the boys, hey man?
Brian knew, and I don't recall any good, bad, ugly, hush mouth. I don't believe it was really a topic of, I didn't have any conversations, and me and Brian conversations were just in the car.
So here we go. From the Observer, Jarrett was asking for 400,000 and 450,000. What's that?
I said, is this the go home?
We're getting close.
No,
what's funny is you and I've been talking now for over 2 hours, and we're on page 6 of 11 pages of notes. So we're home stretching because we know the rest of the story. I feel like I needed to add context to how did we get here? We ultimately know what's going to happen. So I think we can sort of zip through this. But Meltzer would write, Jarrett was asking for 400 and 450,000 downside guarantee over 2 years to stay, which is apparently what he got from WCW and what Titan ultimately matched, roughly the same pay category that Chris Jericho was getting, but not until after Russo left, and probably not until the realization that he had the IC title and could have embarrassed them by leaving without doing the job, after seemingly not being interested in him at anywhere near that price. By then, he'd already really made his decision to go with Russo, who needed his own political allies in the dressing room and shark-infested waters. So timeout right there. Is it fair to say that Meltzer is just sort of trying to deduce what he thinks happened? Because you have not mentioned Russo one time in any of this.
I mean, and that's Dave. He deduced it. And I'm sure even the people in WCW, they had no idea. Like I had no idea what was going on in WCW, or you just don't know. They're just thinking, oh, this is kind of simple. I'm going to put 2 and 2 together. They didn't know the story behind the story. Nobody did.
So you're literally walking into the arena here, the Intercontinental Champion, and you're unsigned. And everybody's probably a little nervous about that. I'm sure that Vince McMahon at least thinks of Bret Hart and Survivor Series 97, and he probably thinks of Medusa showing up on Nitro. But when he had that conversation with you on the 15th, and he said, "Can I count on you to be there?" As the son of a promoter, he probably feels like this is different. Jeff's going to be there. Would you agree with that?
And again, I'll go back to my delusional, optimistic mindset. But I sincerely believe he absolutely believes that.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a random name here, but we got to mention it because it's in print. Bob Holly wrote this in his book, talking about you. He walked into the arena for the pay-per-view without his gear and went straight to Vince. Backstage, we could all hear them yelling in Vince's office. Jeff was demanding that Vince pay him all the money he was owed from previous events and the money for the match he was going to do that night, or he wasn't going to go to the ring. Shane, Vince's son, was really vocal. He was cussing Jeff out and was ready to beat the shit out of him. Jeff is a mild-mannered guy who wouldn't fight anybody, so he just sat there and held his ground. Let's time out right there. Was there a shouting match in Vince's office?
No.
When you walk in the building, do you come in without your gear?
So this is where that's crazy. And what's kind of mesmerizing to me, Bob Holly's, not just Bob Holly, but Bob Holly's editor thought it was important enough to their book to put that in his book, completely incorrect, not factual at all. But here we are still talking about it. But so, I mean, that just the context of that is a little amusing to me, I'll say. But no. So what was interesting was got up, showered. I don't know if me and Brian, I'm sure ate breakfast, but anyway, we got out of the car and Brian got his bag out and I just shut the trunk. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm not going to take my gear in. I don't really know how this is going to go. He goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Brian," I said, "we've got some business transactions to take care of. Brian, I don't want to know nothing about it." And he walked off. You know, we walked in together, but he's like, "I don't want to." And I just left my gear in the car because I really didn't know from Friday to Sunday look, Vince has a show. He has a promotion. He's responsible.
Maybe he wrote something else, right?
He's responsible at this point on Sunday, October 17th, to everybody else except me.
Yeah.
Knows I'm going to work for his competitor, and rightly so. So he could have very easily said, "Jeff, we're going to go in a different direction. I appreciate you being here. I'm probably going to pay you a couple $100 for just showing up. We're going to catch you up your money. Hey, you know what? Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. But you got to understand, we're going to do a count out. We're going to do a change title. A couple of years before that, they did a Shawn Michaels, Shane Douglas deal. I mean, There's been all kinds of things. We're just going to go in a different direction. Hey, Jeff, matter of fact, remember the day you started and you came up and we did that whole Survivor Series deal and all that? We don't want to get in. We don't want to put ourselves in this kind of environment. It's probably just a lot better, not only for us, but for you. Thanks. But no thanks. Call Beth tomorrow for your stocks and we're going to get you paid up and your checks will keep coming on time. How did I know that conversation wasn't going to take place?
So what did happen?
So, and it's funny, preparing for this week and obviously we know all the news real time that's going on, but and when I went back to WWE in 2019, actually my bad, in 2018 for the Hall of Fame, and then 2019 when I was working with his individual day in and day out. So I get to the building, go in. Terry Taylor was one of the first guys that I saw. "Hey, Jeff, good to see you." And I think they had sort of broken from production meeting and I'd like to hear the podcast. I just heard, and look, I nobody likes this, but I heard Jim didn't have a real good production meeting because they knew sort of the set of circumstances and that kind of stuff. But so I go in and I tell Terry, I'm trying to think somebody else was there, but I just said, "Hey, I'd like to work something out today. We need to figure this out." And Terry's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Terry, it's probably not a conversation for you to have." He said, "Who is?" I said, "Look, I'll talk to Vince. I'll talk to JR. You guys got a show to run, but you know, if we're going to get a deal done, we probably need to get on it now because there's a lot of ins and outs to it." And Terry's just like, "Get a deal done." I said, "It's not about the match. It's not. It's not about the match." "Okay, I'll be back." And so I go out in the arena and they're load in, load out. And I just sit, maybe 15th row ringside, opposite end of entrance, and just sort of sat down in my chair and just started thinking through what I had strategized in my brain. And I look over to my corner, and this gentleman retold the story through his eyes. And I'm talking about a young, brand new in the WWF this times, who had just sort of come on board maybe a year prior, Mark Carrano.
Wow.
Mark Carrano's job description for October the 17th, 1999, words out of his mouth were to follow JArrett and the belt. And I said, and I asked him in 2018, follow JArrett and the belt? Like, what does that mean? He goes, we wanted to know where the belt was. I'm like, oh my gosh. Mark, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. I'm just standing over here. And I didn't really put two and two together at the time, but his job was to follow me around and keep an eye on me. If I was going to leave, he was to give everybody the heads up and all this kind of stuff. So anyway.
If this was a football game, he was the QB spy. He's just watching the ball. He's just watching you.
All he was doing. And no ball was in it was in the Gund Arena. It was in the car, in the trunk.
So you specifically left it and your gear in your bag in the car.
Yeah. And that is not, I'm going to flex my muscles. I truly had no idea how the day was going to go.
Hypothetically, was it one of your Halliburtons?
No.
That would have been hilarious.
It's Toomey Duffel.
Would have been hilarious. Yeah. So you tell Terry, hey, I need to talk to Vince. And
I specifically remember, I'll talk to Vince if that's what needs to happen, or I'll talk to JR, or I'll talk to anybody. But I want to talk about money today.
And what happened?
So sat down, JR came up and sat down and says, where we at? I said, well, Jim, I really hate.
Are you in catering? Are you in the arena?
In the arena.
Okay.
And I said, Jim, no, Terry left on the first conversation. He came back for the conversations following, but me and JR sat down, and he's like, where we at? And I said, Jim, I just want to say, man, I hate that this is where we're at. I feel as a character, I'm about as hot as I've been since several years ago. But I said, I got it. I understood that you got to make your decisions and Vince has to make his decisions. Well, Jeff, we thought we had a deal. I said, I don't know how you could think that. I never signed anything. I never saw a contract. I mean, there was nothing. And he goes, well, I thought we come to agreement. Business is so hot, man. You don't want to go down to that place. And I'm like, this isn't, I don't even know if he said that, but it was just pretty much chit chat, small talk, because at this point he knew the ship had sailed.
It's done. Yeah.
Done. And I said, so Jim, here's the situation. I want to make everybody's life easier from today moving forward. I want to get out of your hair, and not specifically you, Jim, but the WWF's hair. I want there to be a nice parting of the ways. Let's do our business today and move on. You guys got a lot on your horizon, going public tomorrow. You got Raw, you got SmackDown, UPN. That was a really big deal. I mean, SmackDown was, I don't think we probably stressed enough on how big of a deal it was during that summer that, quote unquote, our television distribution doubled to a network. I mean, it was big news. I was on the very first SmackDown, and me and China had several cool storylines. We did the mud match on that. So SmackDown was a big component of this. So there was a lot going on in Jim's eyes. Everybody's workload, quote unquote, exponentially went up. It wasn't just we're so common to it today, and it's amazing. WrestleMania week has Raw, SmackDown, Hall of Fame, NXT 1, NXT 2. I mean, there's so much. We're doing it. Back in those days, it was Raw and TV. I mean, it was Raw and pay-per-view and live events. So adding another 2-hour network show was big business. So anyway, back to the story. So I said, listen, I want this. He said, well, what do you got in mind? I said, I want to clean it up. I said, the payoffs that I have coming to me. I said, I really think it's best for everybody. I want to get paid for all the money I have coming for me. You know what that is, Jeff? And I said, as far as dates, I said, yeah, I know my live events that I hadn't got paid. And I said, I got the pay-per-views and we got the day to cover. So I would like to clean all that up. Well, I don't know if we can do that, Jeff. I said, okay, I understand that. You guys can't meet that, then I don't really know why I'm here.
Yeah.
Because I have zero leverage when I leave today, Jim. You're an old timer like me. Once today's over, it's over.
As an adult, don't we all miss spring break? Nothing like taking a week off from all your responsibilities. Well, here's the next best thing for adults, a spring break from house payments. SaveWithConrad.com can help you get rid of all your credit card debt, just like that. We're routinely helping our listeners save $5, $6, $7, even $800 a month. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this, but check this out, no house payments for 2 months. At SaveWithConrad.com, NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.
You're going to
I want to add context to that because you said earlier you felt like you'd been shortchanged on some payoffs. You specifically cited some loops that you were on with Dustin, and you went back and you complained, and they wrote another check. But as you said, you didn't know if it was necessarily making a correction as much as it was just placating you. Well, by God, that's because he's trying to keep his Intercontinental Champion happy, and let's just keep the wheel going. But if you're going to another company, well, what's my motivation to fix your pay now?
No.
You forfeit all leverage if you don't go ahead and square up right now. And you probably did have your quarterly checks for royalties. You had a track record of about what I'd been making on the house shows when it was the accurate number, not the lowball number. And you probably had a track record for what your pay-per-view payoffs were. So in my head, we haven't talked about this. You add all that together and say, here's the number I think it is, and here's how I got to that number. Is that right?
So it's 3 or 4 house show runs and 2 or 3 pay-per-views. And I knew the number in my head, but I put on the negotiation hat and I said, in theory, can we get this done? Well, and this went back and forth with me and Jim a couple of times. And I said, can I get my money today? Jeff, it ain't up to me. It's up to the old man. Okay, find out. I've just got time today, Jim. He got up, went back, did it, and I don't know exactly, but I know that I made them go first. What is the number?
You always make them go first. That's the best way to do it.
What is that number? And and this is where it gets into, and I had so much time that day on my hands that I had the match in my mind, and I know Pat and China, and we'll get to that in a minute, but Pat Patterson and China are going over different ideas. They've got fish and guitars and flour and powder and, the prep for all the match. And I'm sitting in the arena with my street clothes on, talking to Jim Ross and Terry Taylor and trying to figure this out. So it's an interesting set of circumstances going on. But Jim came back and said, yeah. And I said, well, what's the number? What are you paying me? Because me trying to throw a number is something that you just don't do.
Yeah. You work down from that. So you let them start and you go up from that.
Yes. But also it's not like, hey, I'm at the Garden. I want $5,000 for my shot.
Yeah. No, they always determine the payoff.
100%. That's common ground. And that's pretty a practical matter. The promoter knows what the gross house is and knows what his expenses are. The talent doesn't. So it wasn't like out in the ordinary that I'm saying, hey, you go, Conrad, as a business person, negotiation, you anchor the negotiation. I get all that. That wasn't even my mindset. You're going to have to tell me what that number is. So they came back with a number and I just sat there and I said, let me think on it. And so I think we got a deal, Jeff. Let's get this done. And then, the whole idea of cash and it just gets so preposterous. The stories that have run down and bank wiring and, all that kind of stuff. How that story went from bank wiring and it's a Sunday. Does that even make sense to you?
Oh yeah. Let's mention that. From Bob Holly, he says, Vince said he'd make sure Jeff Jarrett was paid, but Jeff said he wanted the money wired into his account immediately before he brought his bag and the IC belt in. Otherwise, he was getting on a plane and going home. I thought it was wrong to do that. I sort of understood where he was coming from because sometimes it took up to 6 months to get our pay-per-view checks. He was owed a lot of money, and I guess he was worried that Vince wouldn't pay him. Even so, you don't hold somebody up like that. Management had spent so much money building up the match as one of the main events, they couldn't turn it around. They had to deliver Jarrett versus China, and since Jarrett was the IC champ going in, he had Vince over a barrel. When Jarrett confirmed that his wife had the money, over $300,000 had arrived in his account, he brought in his bag, got dressed, and stayed away from everybody. Road Dogg, being the loyal friend he is, stayed by Jeff's side. So you see right there, Bob is saying it was wired. I've always thought, I don't know many bank wires you can get done on a Sunday.
In 99?
Ever, period. You can't get bank wires on Sunday. And then the other thing that we've heard is Jim Ross says somewhere in an interview that you wanted it in cash. And when he said, well, Jeff, there's no banks open on Sunday. What do we do? Supposedly they paid you in cash. Did they pay you in cash?
Just think about that. I'm going to get money wired on a Sunday and my wife is going to oh boy. I love the wrestling industry because you want the fictitious story or you want the truth. So anyway, it's just crazy. No wiring. So anyway, so he came to me, and look, I told you, you're in charge of topics. I'm in charge of truth. So, Jim comes to me and they said, we've sort of done pen to paper and we're thinking 150. We're thinking 150. We'll get it all cleaned up. And I said, okay. All right, Jim, 150 is what you think the number is. You sure? And we more or less did a head nod. And I said, Jim, let me think on this. And I said, this is going on in and blah, 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 this. So he said, I'll be back and let's close this deal up. So however much time transpired, half hour, one of those things, it might've been an hour, might've been 15 minutes, whatever it was. But when he came and sat back down, I said, Jim, remember how you changed the deal on me a year in? And he's like, well, yeah. I said, no, I said, I understand all the reasons you did. And I respect the hell out of it. But we kind of agreed, but we didn't really kind of agree on 150. I don't really agree with that right now. And I've had time to reflect on my last 2 years. So if we're going to get a deal done, this place, Gund Arena, is sold out for sure. And they've got a lot of WWE's money in their box office. So let's double that and get me to 300. And those are my payoffs because I get a healthy payoff out of tonight because, quote unquote, I'm doing the honors. And give me the money out of Gund Arena's bank, not WWE's bank, and let's go to work. And he didn't like it.
What did he say?
He just, Jeff, you can't do that. I said, I totally. And I said, Jim, please look at me because I really want you to understand where I'm coming from. You're absolutely right. You do not have to do this. Vince does not have to do this. Nobody has to do this. I'm wanting my money to, and I'm talking about multiple pay-per-views. The scenario, I'm not under contract. Let's just end this deal one way or another. But I says, as well as I do, tomorrow, my value and payoffs are not even remotely important. They're kind of important today. But it's y'all's decision on how important they are, not mine. It's not my decision at all. Okay, I'm going to go talk to the old man. 30 minutes go by, 45 minutes go by, whatever it may be. And Jim and Terry walked up and said, go get your bag, get dressed. We'll have it for you before you go to the ring. I said, okay. I went, and I'd seen China walking around multiple times. And
she's nervous. It's her big night.
It's her, and not that it was my responsibility to be worrying about her personal feelings, but I did have some compassion for her. I really did because, look, it was her night, and in so many ways, and she deserved every bit of it. There, without question, she worked her ass off. Obviously, she worked her ass off in the gym. at that time, her relationship. I mean, she had done she deserved everything she was getting that night.
And it feels like if you're in her shoes, it might be in jeopardy now. Here we are, and it might not happen.
For sure. Especially what happened on the month before pay-per-view happened on Raw. I throw her down the deal.
Yeah.
I mean, so all, everything going on. And this wasn't going to be, look, how many, I hadn't been in any good housekeeping matches, but I've been in plenty of barroom brawls and moondog matches.
Yeah.
No holds barred in cage. I've been in the business. So all kinds of gimmick matches. I had no problem putting together in my mind, no problem to piece it together. I already had in my mind the prior week leading up to it. We can do this and we can do that. I'd already had the match in my mind pretty much laid out, but me and her hadn't discussed it.
Right.
And then Pat had that because, and man, we'll get to that in a second. I don't know where you want to go with it. If you want to go talk about the match now, but I mean, just Pat, I got to just throw this in there. So once we knew the match was going on, Pat and I'm trying to think who else, because I think Teddy Long, but Pat goes, Jeff, I can't do his accent, but he's like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw him a hell of a curve. And when he lays out that curve, that it looks like I've, DQ, whatever it was, that we're going to get out of it, and the belt didn't switch in hands. I just said, brilliant. I said, the people will come unglued. The false finish that we gave them, it was a DQ or whatever it was, but that was a Pat Patterson. I'm like, this is brilliant.
Well, since you brought up the match, let's talk about the match. But before we do, I want to circle back to two things. One, you asked for it out of the gunned account, and I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, well, why would he do that? But me being me, I just think you're thinking, boy, if I convince them of this and they do something they don't really want to do and they write me a check, you bet your ass before I get to the bank in the morning, that check has had a stop payment issued and it is as worthless as a notebook sheet of paper.
100%.
So if I ask for it from the gunned account, whatever the gate was that night, 5, 6, 7, 800,000, whatever it is, it'll just be 300 light.
It's very simple. And to tell you the truth, how much easier does it make it on everybody?
It is way easier. And I think it's a stroke of genius, but I also love that, because I'm such a nerd, when you filed your taxes that year, you got a fucking 1099 from the gun.
Oh, beautiful, right?
So, boy, God, I love the line when you sit Jim Ross down and this guy
down beside me. He wanted to do business. He didn't have to walk out there,
but he did. And he's taking his lumps now. You felt like he got over on you once before. And when he comes back to visit you the second or third time, whatever it is, and you said, remember, Jim, when you changed my contract? Like in that very moment, you didn't need any Blue Chew, did you? Charity auction coming your way. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about the promo. Bruce told a famous story on Something to Wrestle that he's watching the show on a monitor, and apparently a lot of the quote unquote boys were doing the same. And he somehow winds up watching the scene with Vince McMahon that starts Monday Night Raw with you. Can you sort of set the stage?
So this promo open Raw?
Yeah. And you know what? Let's play it right now. Here we go. Here it is.
Well, now here's the WWF, and here's WCW. Well, there's Jeff Jarrett. And here we have the owner of the World Wrestling Federation, and now the owner of WCW. That's right. Vince McMahon, I have purchased, I own my own competition. And tonight I have the ability to address WWF fans as to what this means. I have the ability to address WCW stars as to what this means to them. And yes, I have the ability to address WCW fans as to what this actually means to them as well. Tonight, at the right time, there'll be a special simulcast. And let me just say that tonight, for sure, one man will make history. And that's me, Vince McMahon. Now, as far as the JArretts of the world are concerned, you know how Jeff spells his name? That's Jeff. Well, you know what? I would suspect that we'd spell it a different way after tonight. That would be capital G, double O, double N, double E. Gone.
That's how Raw started. Top 5 most important Raws in the history of professional wrestling. Maybe one of the most important shows in the history of professional wrestling. And it starts with the Overlord, the most powerful man in wrestling, ribbing the way you spell your name and publicly firing you. Boy, you just got history coming and going, don't you?
Conrad, I had a flashback. Put this on and really think through this. 1986 was my first match.
Yep.
Before that, Kaufman, David Letterman show, Jackie Fargo, Jerry Lawler, all the folks coming through, my vision of the business, my thoughts on the business, and fast forward up, I forgot that open Raw. I had in my mind, and I don't know if people know how you make this chicken shit turn into chicken salad, that you have researchers, and it's a whole team at Ad Free and the guys, but to really drill down into it. But when I knew we were doing this topic, and this is where it comes to, but if you were to hear that back as a 30-something-year-old in my, okay, we'll call it ego. It takes ego to go around this is. I, for a thought, and maybe carried that with me, Vince is going to shoot an angle with me.
Okay.
It's all about money. When I heard that he went through all this, who'd he pick out?
Yeah.
I mean, who did he pick when you really drill it down? He can't fire me because I'm not hired. I'm getting paid through November, October, November, December, whatever it is. But no, who's he got a working relationship that drew money? And when I left in 99 was the hottest heel on the card. That's arguable sake, but a red hot heel. He's a business guy. Who can he take from this roster that he knows will do the job in spite of any circumstances, whether good, bad, or indifferent? My last night in 95, I did the job to Sean. I could have walked out beforehand, did the job to Sean, and left. China, did the job to China, and left. Who's willing to do business? He picked me to fire me. We're doing an angle.
Wow. I think from the outside, we all thought, oh, remember when he held up Vince? This is Vince's receipt. And your brain, as you said, ego comes into it, goes to, no, he knows I'll do business. I'm going to bitch about my payoff. Maybe I'm not going to like my creative, maybe, but I'll do what he wants. I'll put Sean over. You can cover me in flour. That's fine. But the public firing. So take me to that moment. Bruce says, y'all are watching together. Do you remember seeing it on the monitor? Was Bruce nearby? What's your reaction?
I don't remember Bruce, but I'm not to say that. Look, me and Bruce have always, and it goes with me and Tom, his brother, hit it off from day one. And I can't tell you how many miles that I rode with Dr. Tom. And Tom had been in the business, I don't know, 5-7 years longer than me. And Tom was close enough to my age. He wasn't quote unquote an old timer, but was very seasoned. And Tom, like he is today, he's part of the Ad Free family, but he's very giving of his knowledge. And he had a way, and maybe some stories we can't tell on this podcast, but me and Tom had it was unique because Tom would cut through the BS. Hey, Jeff, that sucked. Now, what about this way? So Tom critiqued my in-ring work. So I say all that. Me and Tom had a really tight relationship. He also knew that me and my dad didn't have such a great relationship. I also knew that him and Bruce weren't, oh yeah, he's my brother, but guess what? Our relationship, and they're just two of, I don't know how many Pritchard brothers are there? 5, I think.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah. So you know, our family connection, we ran up the roads together. Tom is a heel, me as a babyface. Tom, I can remember coming through the dressing rooms a lot of nights going, damn, that was a hell of a match. And he was all off Tom's psychology. He knew what he was doing. So anyway, me and Tom had a good relationship. Fast forward to me and Bruce is doing the vignettes, working together. Bruce was a supporter of me working against Scott Hall. I knew that. I absolutely knew that Bruce really liked the Razor Double J storyline. So now I'm not going to get sidetracked, Conrad, and do all that. But fast forward, here comes Bruce. Bruce, we had a relationship. I knew he wasn't he was pissed off that I walked out in Nashville that night, like really mad at me. And also knew coming back, he wasn't the greatest of fan of me coming back in the fold. But Russo was also writing, and I knew everybody had their own individual ups and downs. And, at that time, Russo and Ferraro were lead writers. But anyway, get to Panama City. Again, unless you're in the industry, but the boys will be the boys will be the boys. And at the end of the day, we're all going to cross paths again. Bruce grew up in the wrestling business in Houston. I grew up in Tennessee. So I and maybe wrongly, maybe this is completely inaccurate. Maybe Bruce really enjoyed it for the moment, but I didn't take it anything slight. I don't remember him standing next to me. But as I heard that promo just 5 minutes ago, it came back in my mind. I'm going, he started Raw with Jeff. He started Raw with Jeff. Where are we going with this? People came up and asked me this, namely Bob Ryder.
Not just started Raw, started the Raw. I mean, for years, fans had, and my gosh, look how much money the quote unquote after mags made off of the fantasy booking of what if The Undertaker, wrestled the Giant? What if, The Undertaker wrestled Sting?
Goldberg Austin was the dream match of all dream match when they were red hot.
So all of that, even going back to before Hogan came over, it was Hogan and Flair who would win. They had done this for decades. And now this is the show where it's finally, hey, we're announcing it can happen. I own them both. And instead of starting off with teasing, boy, now we've got the dream matches coming, everybody, nope, I'm going to fire that motherfucker. That's the way we read it, right? Like,
see, and I can't put myself in your shoes.
Yeah.
In this time frame, because I was so ingrained to On the Grind, Nitro, Raw, Thunder, in the TV moment, writing TV, being a part of good creative, being a part of bad creative, all that to go with it. And he starts Raw with Jeff.
Bruce says that he didn't tell you what the creative was, and you didn't know what the creative was. You watched it on a monitor like everybody else. When you saw it, laughed, patted him on the back, and walked away. That sound about right?
And I can tell you, full transparency, and this is so liberating. And we text back and forth, but there's a little bit of cleansing in all this. And through the last 3.5, 4 years, I've had different moments of this. But I can assure you, going on inside of Jeff's head was, I'm going to give him the nervous kind of the golf clap pat.
Yeah.
Walking away like, okay, he started with Raw. What does that really mean? Man, what are we doing next week? Where's Raw at next week? Am I on Raw next week? Am I on SmackDown? Wait, no. Jeff, you're getting too far ahead. Wait, okay. He wouldn't have put me. It's the old game in your mind. He wouldn't have put me on TV unless there were plans. Well, maybe not. Well, I'm getting paid. I'm not going to give that up. And why would he pay me this money when he wouldn't pay me this 2 years ago? And guess what? I'm going back to my Memphis roots. When you have a roster of, in those days at WCW, 100 guys or 80 guys or 60 guys, it's a big pile of mess regardless. Nobody, I can remember Hall, Nash, Hogan, Flair, Goldberg, whatever that, Booker, just the whole big roster. I do remember having this conversation with my dad, maybe not the week after, but the following couple of weeks. Nobody means nothing, Dad. If everybody goes over at once, it's complete dilution. It will not work. It just won't. How can you make anybody special if there's 30 new guys that show up? It just isn't going to work. So that night, though, we're staying on the night.
Hang on, time out. Did you say that because you had seen what happened with the UWF and the NWA before when Crockett bought out Watts?
It's okay. UWF, I always refer to it as Watts territory.
Yeah.
Yes. But if you also remember when Geigel and Kansas City went out of business, there's been an influx. It's just, when we came in to Dallas from USWA and Michael Hayes and Kevin Von Erich, hey, we need your help. Well, all of a sudden, my dad was like, no, wait a minute. Eric Embry's there. We don't need to send everybody at once. And Cactus Jack and Gary Young and, just, I guess, cumulative effect of looking at my entire rearview mirror, so to speak.
People had tried it and it didn't work.
It doesn't work.
So we're trying to do that now to sell some tickets. One person who will not be buying a ticket is Vince McMahon. This is the era where WWE's website has a little internet show called Bite This. And they ask him about TNA, and he says he doesn't understand how they could promote it with no television. And he says, if you're just promoting it to the small audience that watches your pay-per-view, it's going to make things difficult. And that paying $9.95 to see a 2-hour show when you get 2 hours free on Monday and 2 hours free on Thursday sounds difficult, but he has no opinion on the product because he hasn't seen the show. You talked about on one of our prior episodes when you were fired on national TV that the next time you spoke to Vince was to let him know that you were starting TNA and just inquiring about the possibility of working together. Refresh our memory. When did you make that call? What was the tone and tenor of the conversation?
That call didn't take place till 2 or 3 months into the launch.
Okay.
And when I heard this interview, boy, I just had a flashback. I was shocked, A, that they asked the question. It's not like it was, hey, Ben, we're going to spring this on you. And B, that, well, not only did they allow it, the way he even gave it an answer, because the Vince I knew never punched down, ever. Don't even act like they exist, ever. You just, that's his mindset. Don't talk good. Don't talk bad. Act like they don't exist. And so for him to even respond, although it was just on Bite This, I can remember going, wow, he actually, they did answer it.
Tell me about the street team. What were you, when you called Bert and he said, hey man, I need you to get to Huntsville, put together a street team, break down exactly what you hoped Bert was going to do.
But Bert's a independent wrestling promoter. And they're hustlers. They know how to create a little buzz. And this is, again, before social media. So it's a different mindset when you got to poster a town or put handbills on towns. And when it's something I've done my whole life. You go into a town and like Huntsville, and you could probably name places, but you look for high traffic areas, whether it's downtown or, malls on a Saturday afternoon, or find out where there's going to be a radio remote or whatever it is. You sort of have to get into the DNA of the community, go to ballparks. I can remember, that's another thing when you're going into a town on Saturday, people that have kids and families, they're not at their house. They're either at the soccer field or the softball field or the baseball diamond. Get into there. And if you have, those days, go to Kinko's, get you 10,000 handbills. And the handbill, people don't know. It's you know what a handbill is, Conrad?
Yeah.
Terminology. I'm making sure that it's just something, it's a small poster, glass poster, and hand them out and get them in people's hands. And we had a street team go all over, in a 60-mile radius of Huntsville, it's a way where you don't have to buy advertising. You get a street team and they advertise.
Come on now. You mean to tell me you think Vince McMahon decided, with all the success that he had outside of WWE and then the success he had in NXT, I know what we need to do for Karrion Kross. Let's dress him up like a modern day Farouk. That's not that. No, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that Vince McMahon doesn't occasionally do shit just to, he didn't look at that and say, God damn, this is exactly what we want. Screw everything that was working. We got to do this.
Conrad, it's the first freaking episode of the year. And I love Kevin Kross. Don't create any.
I'm not shitting on Kevin Kross.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
No. You think Kevin Kross picked that outfit? He didn't pick that outfit. He didn't say, hey, let's change everything that's been working. He didn't do that.
I know, but he did.
You assumed, I think you had to assume, I'm putting words in your mouth. You had to assume when you heard, hey, Scarlett and Kross are going to the main roster. Well, just take what they're doing on NXT and put it on the main roster, right?
The entrance was my bud.
Unbelievable.
It's what it's, WWE does a lot of right things, and creating that emotion before the first lockup is one of their trademarks. I agree. The entrance was fantastic.
And when you saw him come out there in that skirt and helmet, you had to be like, well, what the hell's this? Right.
Let's change the pace.
and they did it to Keith Lee. And my point is, I can't be convinced that he being Vince McMahon, doesn't occasionally acquiesce just to prove people wrong. And here's my thinking. I have been under the impression, I'm not saying this happened again, I wasn't there, that maybe Cornette was a little feisty with Russo and Russo's style of Crash TV that really became paramount in 1997, where we've got these over the top situations and circumstances. And I believe that Cornette still had faith in traditional, for lack of a better word, old school wrestling, tried and true, proven. Hey, people still want to see competitive matches with good looking baby faces and badass heels and all that type of stuff. And I too still think that works, but it feels like it may have gotten a little too loud and proud. And one of the Vinces, whether it's McMahon or Russo, was like, let's just show him, with the idea being, I'll give him enough rope to hang himself here. That's just an expression, but you know what I mean.
For sure.
That, hey, we'll trot that out there just so we can not have to hear about this anymore. But I've also heard people say, like back in the day, I heard people say that Luke Harper had been Arn Andersoned because Arn was pushing behind the scenes anytime there was a meeting. Hey, what about Luke? Hey, what about Harper? Because he was really impressed with his matches. And then when the big giant push that everybody kind of expected or hoped for never came along, people would say, oh, he got Arn Anderson. And we've heard the same thing about Paul Heyman. Bruce Pritchard, out of his own mouth on Something to Wrestle, has said that Paul would hammer somebody so hard that there was pushback. CM Punk was a victim of that. I want him to tap the Big Show out in 60 seconds with the Anaconda Vice. That's Bruce doing an impression of Paul Heyman pitching.
Yes.
The idea being that if somebody pushes too much, they're just like, all right, we're going to show you. And I feel like this NWA angle is that. I don't think that this thing had to be snake bit. I just think it was, well, we'll show you. Do you disagree with that?
No, the dynamic of the room. And that's where I was going with the whole, my takeaway when I closed my iPad last night after the research, I actually texted Eric, like the creative room that was, now you have Vince and Bruce and Ed, and lead writers, and then junior writer, but you have a room full of writers. Bruce, cut his teeth in Houston. Cornette cut his teeth in Tennessee. Pat Patterson, God, all over the country, but all that. So those are, we'll use those three. And then Russo, worked at the video store and magazine writer and worked his way up. Really 4 strong personalities in a room. And at the end of the day, Vince was obviously running the show. And I can see all that dynamic, just what you laid out. Let's just show him. Let's just show him. I still am going to say that Vince didn't say, we'll show him and we'll go fail. Vince, and his rightly so, supreme confidence is, all right, I'm going to take this idea that may have some date on it, may have some baggage on it, but maybe if we do it, put a little touch here, maybe I can make chicken salad out of this chicken shit with that. So we're kind of saying the same thing, but I don't think Vince just says, hey, we're going to go do this to fail. Who does that to valuable TV time? Nobody, and that I'm aware of. But snake bit is an understatement, because this is a perfect example of the different philosophies of the room at the time. Again, I wasn't in the room, but what a mess. And it gets messier and messier and messier.
My point is, this was not TV time for you. This was for Austin.
Oh, yeah.
So he will sacrifice. Hey, here's the big dog's got to eat, is my point. And you were prey at that point.
Oh, 1,000%, not 100%, 1,000%.
but it's been positioned to Cornette as, okay, we'll give him what he wants. Well, he didn't mean for Austin to come shit on the shit in 3.5 minutes, right?
Probably not.
Yeah,
Probably not.
I get what you're saying, but I think the same thing. Like, I know we did the whole Killer Cross thing earlier, or Karrion Cross thing earlier. Yeah, he put that out there for Jeff Hardy to eat. It wasn't for Cross. And I know that people, sort of split hairs on what we're trying to say here. But Jeff Hardy can't go out there and wrestle himself. I mean, he probably could, but you know what I mean. He's got to have some
He's
big,
got to have a team on
looking good dude to take down and beat up. He's got to beat somebody. So why not let it be this guy dressed like a gladiator?
But at the end of the day, because it wasn't a 1 week wonder here. I mean, at some point I can see in Vince's mind, or even the whole room's mind, look, we're going to come out of it. We're going to do this. But at some point, I'm going to get it over the way I want to get it over. You don't think Vince had that thought?
I'm not arguing that he felt like there could be value with this, but I mean, I'm not saying this to be an ass, but he also put the Truth Commission and the Barrique was on TV because somebody's got to lose these matches. So yes, you're going to get TV time, but you're going to be counting the lights.
There you go. And not everybody can be main event. You know what? And then I would assume you've covered it on some of your other podcasts, but from a business perspective, and I started to call you at some point last week, and then I'm like, no, I'll wait. I want to have a phone conversation, and we're both busy during the week, and then football got going and all that. So my question is, Conrad, last week, I mean, not just Twitter world, just kind of I got some crazy, bizarre texts from two dudes in the law firm that reps me. Obviously my buddies in the gym. It was just a lot of chatter on, hey, what do you think? Of course they were asking about the chairman re-entering the picture, but the questions really started landing on, you think he's going to go private, or you think it's going to be a buyer and all that kind of stuff? Taking out, I'll say the emotion, Conrad, because Comcast, Disney, or Amazon, or whoever you want to, whatever publicly traded company versus going private. And I think there's a couple of different scenarios where it could go private. What's your thoughts on positive and negatives, or just your thoughts? I'll shut up. But do you have any? I really do. I was going to call you privately, but what's your thoughts on the public-private debate, if you will, or discussion?
Eric and I have broken it down 2 weeks in a row, and the episode that just came out today, as you and I are recording it, we did over 2 hours talking about every little moving piece of this.
Oh, wow.
And Eric, he gets down in the rabbit hole. So Eric has done a lot of research and talked to a lot of folks, and he's got some pretty strong opinions. And he and I both landed on, we think the company is going private. And as I said, I think to you, but I know to some others, when the first announcement was made that Vince was coming back, he already had a plan. He already knew what he wanted to do. And we think a lot of this stuff about, well, we're working with JP Morgan and we're going to talk about alternative sales and alternative options and strategic strategies and all the little buzzwords. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's got a plan. I think he's going private. And I don't know what that means for when a 77-year-old takes his business private, like from a succession plan. And I'm not saying that because it does bear resemblance to the HBO show Succession. And I posted a sort of a tongue-in-cheek silly tweet when Stephanie stepped down. That was a reference to that, but that's what I believe. I believe the company goes private and that Vince already had a plan while he was off on whatever island he was on, learning to fly fish and grow his easy top beard. Not that either one of those happened, but yeah, that's what I think is happening. He's going to go private.
Okay. I'm glad I asked you publicly. Wasn't real sure. I was asked that from a couple of different people, and I said, "Well, you want to?" And I put it in the words in their mouth. Why don't you ask me what do I want to see happen?
Yes,
and I definitely believe, and we don't have a lot of history in our industry, but the professional wrestling industry is just. It's run much better in a private setting because there's a vision, there's a final decision maker. The buck stops with one person. It's just how I think the success of our industry can thrive. And I'm just saying, I think the wrestling industry can be much more successful if WWE is private, for all the obvious reasons and some not so obvious. When you in your public world, you in a lot of ways, your boss is Wall Street. And how much context does Wall Street really have in our industry? That's how I view it. So
You even said to me privately, there's a phrase you like to use about corporate and wrestling. Do you want to say that? Share it with everybody, your belief.
Refresh my memory. I'm not sure where you're going with this one.
Corporations kill wrestling. Wrestling can't exist in a corporation. Corporate wrestling sucks. Blah, blah, blah. I've heard you sort of beat that drum a variety of different ways that you feel strongly that, yeah, it's not going to work. Wrestling will never work in a corporate structure.
No matter who is in charge at WWE, try explaining that 2 levels up, 3 levels up, Bob Iger, Jeff Bezos, whatever. Wait, what are you talking? I mean, gosh, but believe me, I've done it on a teeny, tiny level, but I had to do it with Panda often. It's very hard to translate.
It's a whole new world. Do you know what today is? As folks are listening to this,
Paul Heyman's birthday. Oh no, Paul.
That was yesterday. Today, as folks are listening to this,
I know it's. Hey, this is monumental.
Is the first day that Vince McMahon doesn't own WWE in my whole life. They're closing the merger officially today. TKO is the new company. Ari Emanuel is the new big boss. Process that, boys and girls. For the first time you've been in the wrestling business, Jeff Jarrett, Vince McMahon has a boss as of today.
Can I take it one step further?
Please do.
Today is the first day that the wrestling business can no longer say it's a family business.
Oh.
The McMahons were truly the last of the territories. Now, it grew and went national, then went global and went public. But at the end of the day,
it's the last territory.
Yep. On Christmas or Thanksgiving or holidays, whether the McMahon sat around the kitchen table or not, it was still a family run business.
Crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's just hard to really wrap your head around.
Yeah, it is. Yes.
And don't get me wrong, wrestling's still a family business to the Aspers who own Impact. It's still a family business to AAA, to AEW. But to your point, this is the last of the American territory system.
That's what, yeah.
And I know it's been publicly traded and blah, 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 but boy, he just had all the control and the majority of the ownership. And that is no longer the case today. Correct. And it's the first time that has been the case. And all I can think is, I say to myself, how much longer until Double J is in the big seat over there? Because I know you got a pea shooter just the size of Ari Emanuel's ribcage.
Oh,
and you're going to get up there. But see, you've leveled your fleecing game up. You're out of the box office money. Now you're looking for stocks, baby. Stocks. When's your contract up? Don't say it. All the clickbaits will get it. But hypothetically, it would not surprise me.
You stop.
I'm just saying. You're going to be wrestling a vampire and a zombie and so much more on Friday Night SmackDown for the Pluto World Championship. And you know what? It might come down to you and Triple H in a salad steel cage match.
Listen at you. You fantasy booking over there, pal.
I don't know what to think.
Yeah, I know.
My whole life it's been like I made this comparison once and people sort of poked fun at it. Throw that photo of Vince McMahon back up there again, Marcus. Vince McMahon is our Walt Disney.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of looks like Walt right there.
Yep.
But I'm just saying, and I know he's still in control and. But boy, everybody wanted to know, what's it going to look like when? And I think even though we don't have all the answers, we have a much clearer answer now, don't we? TKO, Endeavor. That's the answer.
Change is in the air, and it always happens that way. When I just kind of got a download Saturday, just I don't know if you got to know, but I whooped your boy Cody out on the lake on a tubing afternoon. But I had a nice weekend, Conrad, and get to have a couple of phone calls here and there and decompress and think things through, and kind of got to catch up on CMLL, and that's a family-run business. And with that catch-up call does come a kind of a AAA. That always kinds of updates there, and as much change that has taken place, I'll call it coming out of the pandemic. You just look at our industry, and I think 2024, and I know where are you talking about? We've still got fourth quarter of 2023. The business will continue to rapidly change in multiple ways, and what an upswing it's been on. But Conrad, let me ask you something. And this is, I don't know if we should get any deeper than just this. Would you rather be currently on the merger working for UFC or WWE?
Do I get to pick what department?
Oh, well, that probably that's of course Connie would come back with the greatest.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think there's a creative department in UFC.
Yeah.
So if you work in WWE creative, you're probably okay. If you work in WWE travel, they probably book a lot more travel than UFC travel, so you're probably okay. But boy, if you're in legal, coin flip. If you're in marketing, coin flip. If you're in HR, coin flip. I hate it because we're talking tongue in cheek about a lot of people losing their jobs.
Yeah, and that's why go ahead.
But that's a huge opportunity for AEW. The narrative has been that AEW is still a growing company and maybe needs some help filling some holes infrastructure wise. But this is such a unique industry. Where do you find those people who have that experience? And if you're a really tenured person who's been with the same company for, we'll call it, more than a decade, why in the world would you, where you feel like you're tenured and you've been here forever, you don't roll the dice on something new. So you probably just hang around and keep doing what you've been doing because it's working. And this is how you support your family and. Saying all that to say, I think there's a chance that the big winner in this big merger could wind up being AEW, because Tony can still operate off of gut and feel, and maybe there's less corporate decision making and more and less of a stringent budget. And there's some real talent that maybe is a big value add for AEW from folks who might be losing their jobs. So I want to be clear. I want what's good for wrestling, and what's good for wrestling is creating more jobs. And I'm hopeful, and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping against hope that when these layoffs come, because we do think there will be efficiencies. We're not trying to speak that into existence. That's just normally what happens when there's a merger.
Sure.
And if that happens, I hope that most, if not all of those folks, find a new happy home with AEW. And that makes AEW a stronger organization as a result, more infrastructure and more efficiency and more cost savings. Because make no mistake, a merger happens for cost savings. But if those same jobs, when they just get realigned with AEW, if that were to happen, create more cost savings and efficiencies for AEW, it's a win for everybody.
Yep.
And I would love to see that be the case. I don't want to see anybody lose their job. I just think that's terrible. I mean, there are real people who pay for real babies and real insurance and real housing and clothing and food. I'm talking about just basic necessities here. It's a lot bigger than just, I don't like that storyline. I mean, these are folks paying their bills. So I'm pulling for that, Jeff. I'm going to be optimistic. And I'm going to say that these folks who maybe get their walking papers, maybe they get a new soft landing spot in Jacksonville. You got any words of wisdom? You've never been in the bushes very long. You always land in a good spot. What's your words of wisdom to any of those folks who maybe are looking at that?
2, delusional optimism. No, it's the only mindset. I mean, we could come up with so many old sayings, but I think old sayings don't get to be old sayings unless they're true.
Right.
You can't walk through a new door unless you leave the old door. I mean, it's impossible to climb a mountaintop unless you're in a valley. Change is inevitable. Good things happen. This is the most simplistic thing. Nothing happens if you don't take action. Take massive, radical action. And that to me is one of my mantras. You gotta shake the bushes, try to make something happen, have some patience here and there. It's definitely not the end of the world. There's so much opportunity. That's how the end of my call happened Saturday. Well, one thing's for sure, there's going to be a lot of opportunity coming up in this industry because it is getting smaller.
Unfortunately, I guess it's that time of the show where we need to talk about the ugliness of the last few days. Did you read all 67 pages?
No, sir.
It's dark. Not what I expected. And there's so many questions coming out of it. I don't really even know how to talk about this, Jeff, because I feel like I'm having trouble just reconciling it in my head. I feel like I've kind of been in a head funk, if I'm honest with you, Jeff, since Thursday when I read it. I was actually on my way to Tampa when I got the news by text. A friend of ours sent me a screen grab, and then I went and found the actual court document and downloaded it to my phone and read it on the way to Tampa. And by the time I landed, I was like, I don't know how to reconcile my fandom with all of this. Because on the one hand, like, I think most of us really, really like professional wrestling, or we wouldn't be recording this podcast or listening to this podcast. And he being Vince McMahon, pronouns pal, was such a big part of that. You kind of give him credit for a lot of it. And then you read all of that stuff in black and white and you're like, what am I doing with my life? What in the world? Like, it's got all over me. And I know that he's responded and said that it's a bunch of lies and he's going to fight it and defend his reputation. But he's done. I just don't see a scenario where Vince McMahon can not only never return to WWE or for that matter, professional wrestling, he can't be a public person anymore. I don't think. Would you agree with that? I mean, who wants to do business with him? He is the definition of toxic right now. No.
Oh, I mean, that is an appropriate word for January the 29th, 2024. Over the last couple of years, Conrad, I don't even know really where to start, and it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
In so many ways, knowing the relationship that my father had with his father.
Right.
So it really does go back, and my grandmother thought so highly of Vince's father, and kicking and screaming, she understood the magnitude of the early WrestleManias, if you will, and me going to work for them and heard little questions. You making good money? And I'd say, Teeny, you have no idea. It was a completely different foreign world. And so when I go on my set point there, and like I said, over the last couple of years, Conrad, I look at life completely different. I have really gotten into Stoicism philosophy and going back thousands of years and on just life. And one thing's for sure is change and the yin and the yang, and there's no such thing as all good and no such thing as good, all evil. And just Conrad, but the screenshots that I read, it was toxic. It was unbelievable, from hard to wrap my head around all of it.
Yes.
Knowing, and look, my opinion is subjective, and however much credit you want to give him or the family or the WWF and the team, and going back, Vince acquiring it from a gorilla and the other two, and it just, the history of it all. Everybody looks at this completely different, and there's a Twitter voice and an Instagram voice, and they are different, and a Facebook voice, and the mainstream media voice, and old school, new school. But no matter where you sit on it, it is disturbing. And for all intents purposes, it's the end of an era. And it is a new day in the professional wrestling business. And look, it's the magnitude and how it's gone down. And look, you can't subtract any one component of, I mean, we talked a little bit about on this, Georgia Michelle on the board, off the board, and Nick Khan in, and the change in leadership, and off and on, off and on. And, everyone knew at some point that Vince was gonna, and the joke was he's gonna, die in that seat. Just because he even said that, just the evolution of the WWE and where it goes, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And we've talked about the very cool things of Rock sitting on the board, and Nick Khan, and Netflix, and all this. But the tragedy of how the man, Vince McMahon, sits today, it's unbelievable, Conrad.
It is, like,
it's so, again. And look, I would be remiss without saying this. He who without sin cast the first stone. And that's what my faith tells me.
right.
But my goodness, Connie,
Yeah.
it is. I like you said at the beginning, I don't have words for it. I really don't.
I think before we get too far into the discussion, we need to say that it took a lot of bravery on the victim's part to come out with this. And I know there's a bunch of Looney Tunes online who are going to victim blame and laugh and defend Vince. Man, if you read all 67 pages, I think you'd disagree. Like, I mean, I am a wrestling fan because of Vince McMahon's creations. He was our Walt Disney, and now that's all done, man. Like, it feels like he's got to sort of be erased from WWE history. I mean, I understand if people, call for him to quote unquote be Benoit, but you think back to like that WrestleMania 20 Open. You see Vince's grandfather and Vince's dad and Vince, and now Shane, and now there's Shane's son who now plays college football. And to think that the McMahon lineage now, by and large, is going to be erased from this company. Like, I just felt like that was going to be such a part of this company forever and ever. Amen. I mean, we even saw Shane's son do an interview a few months ago about who was going to run WWE. Would it be him or one of Hunter's kids? Like, and I guess some of that could still happen, but boy, it is just way different. And to know the way Vince felt about his dad and his father and the pride and the McMahon family crest being on the championship belts on down the line. I know this sounds crazy, but on some level, like, I know Vince wanted to be a billionaire. And when that graphic came out, his profile photo or portrait with TKO, and he had the little mustache, people joked he looked like a movie villain. But now his reputation, dude, his legacy. I mean, what's the difference between being worth 500 million and a billion? Your quality of life doesn't change. You can only drive so nice of a car and fly so nice of a jet and live in so nice of a house and eating so nice of a steak. You sort of max out. But legacy is what a lot of these guys are, still working for in their advanced stages. And now that's irreparable, I'm afraid.
Well, I have been taught that if you are still breathing,
there you go.
Nothing is irreparable.
I love talking to you, the delusional optimist.
Well, I mean, I have just this morning at 7:30, Conrad, I heard a story that would make the hair on your neck stand straight up, and you would say, I said this. Only by the grace of God is this gentleman sitting in his chair today. There isn't any logical explanation. There's no way I can stretch it and make it a sci-fi. I mean, Hollywood, nothing other than, okay, God stepped into this gentleman's life and look at him today. So I say that to say it is a very dark day in Vince's life, but it ain't over till it's over.
Well, man, I would love to see some sort of way to find a silver lining.
Yeah.
I really struggled with that because I didn't know what that was. I mean, it's clear that, and I don't want to hammer names here, so I'm just going to say the victim. It's clear that she's going to get paid and Vince will write a check punitively. I mean, I think that's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, I don't understand all that. I mean, I don't.
But the word traffic being used in a civil suit caught me off guard, and that WWE was named, not good. And we've heard a few months ago that allegedly the feds raided Vince's house. Feds aren't usually involved in civil suits, so this feels like there could be more to follow. And I guess what I'm trying to hope for, I'm hoping, as unrealistic as this sounds, I'd like to be the delusional optimist, think the best of people, and I'd hope that these are isolated incidents. I would hope that this really horrible behavior started when he was in his 70s. I would hope that there wouldn't be a whole bunch of new accusations come forward like we saw in the past with really powerful people like Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein. But I gave up on Santa Claus a few years ago. I just feel like it's obvious that there's going to be more. And I hate that because, and I want to talk about this because I know you have a unique experience with this. I think on some level, when you read those 67 pages, when you pick your jaw up off the floor, your takeaway will be there's some mental illness at play here. And I don't know if you heard about it, but 5 or 6 years ago, there was talk and discussion of making a Vince McMahon movie. and he was working with some script writers, and some people got their hands on those rough drafts. And in the early formative years of Vince's life, boy, he suffered greatly in the sexual trauma department. And it doesn't feel like it was ever maybe properly addressed. And now maybe he's just lived with it his entire life. I'm not trying to make Vince the victim here. I'm just saying, I hope that this, because that used to not be a conversation, Jeff. People didn't talk about stuff like this. Now with mental health, I mean, I don't even remember hearing that when I was a kid, mental health.
No.
So we're getting better. We need to have more conversations, but I don't know how we get to where those documents were without some sort of mental illness. I'm saying all that to say, I'm really proud that she spoke up and came forward. It took a lot of bravery. I hope if there's anyone else who's been affected in the same way, they'll do the same. But I hope most importantly, we try to be better. This hasn't happened yet, and I hope it doesn't. But boy, 25 years ago, it became real in fashion to make Monica Lewinsky jokes. That was not cool then, and it's not cool now. And I hope we don't do that here.
It's sick.
And I understand you're not thinking about everybody else involved. Because when Vince was in his mind only quote unquote hurting this victim, man, as sad as and scary as this sounds now, his actual wife has to read this, his daughter, his grandkids, people he's done business with, lifelong friends. Like, phew, I want to be on your line of thinking. I want to find that silver lining. I want to hope there is a way that he can turn this around and redeem himself. But I hope
there is.
I hope that those around him find a way to move on and move forward and find the peace and contentment that everyone strives for. But golly, what an insurmountable task. And in the scheme of things, how silly is it to even talk about wrestling, which is why I want to do this at the end, because it's going to be real hard for me to get excited about talking about, does Cody win at WrestleMania? Because yes, it's important, but my goodness, man, the collateral damage of professional wrestling, I don't think has ever really been examined the way it's about to be examined in the coming months. It's crazy. 2024, dude. What the fuck?
It's only the 29th.
I mean, Bill Belichick's gone from the Patriots. Nick Saban's retired. Vince McMahon's out of WWE. Taylor Swift's in the Super Bowl. I'm in more wrestling Hall of Fames than Vince McMahon will ever be now. What?
I knew it. But it's life. I mean, one thing is for certain, change.
Yeah.
You never know where it's going to come. I mean, nobody had it on their bingo card for, oh God, so many different things. I'm not only going to address the Vince situation on that. Just, you just never know what life's going to bring at you. And it really, I don't know, Connie. I don't even know really. Yeah, you said it. Not a lot of gumption. I love my world listeners. I love interacting with them in person, online, text, blah, 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 blah. This episode, it is the business. I don't think we're being dramatic. It's changed forever in not all negative ways. There's a lot of positive in there. But it is a new day, but nobody, it is kind of, it's hard for me to wrap my head around all of it. I used the term that I learned 6 years ago. Let's process this. If you process things and really am honest with yourself, there becomes kind of a light on certain things, and you go, okay, well, there's only one thing left to do. Roll up your sleeves and go to work. And there's a lot of work with a lot of folks that are in front of them. That's not going to be easy. It's just not. I mean,
I hate it too because it feels like there's probably more than one divorce as a result of this.
oh Lord.
Probably lots of lawsuits, probably lots of settlements,
Oh boy.
and you got to assume there's criminal stuff too. I just, golly, man, and I know that for Benoit, people would say, can you separate the art from the artist? That's going to be hard for me on this one, man.
Mm.
Because, I think I was able to reconcile the Benoit stuff. I hate to make such a comparison because I realize they're different things. But when I think about sort of persona non grata in wrestling, it's got to be them now above maybe all others. But I want to think that was CTE and that wasn't really him and yada, yada, yada. I don't know how to do that with Vince yet.
Time changes. It does. I've got personal experience. I mean, look, if we're going to get really peeling the layers of the onion back, and that's what recovery was all about for me. And I'm not talking about just the last 6 years. I'm talking about my earliest childhood memories were discussed. And I mean, really peeling the layers of the onion back and understanding that it didn't take me 6 months to walk into this mess. It took me 30 years to really unpack. It took me a lot of times to walk into the dark place that I got myself in 2017. I mean, a lot of years. Multiple times should have been dead. Multiple times. I don't want to get into all that, but I mean, it didn't happen overnight. So you're not going to walk back out of the woods overnight either. It's time. It is a fascinating process, but nothing happens unless you make the decision, I'm changing. And I'm not talking about Vince. I'm talking about all parties involved. What are you going to do to make a positive change?